Welcome to the Therapists Uncut Podcast, where off-the-clock therapists who happen to be friends share their uncensored thoughts about real life. Join us weekly in spreading positivity and making mental health relatable through casual conversation, inspirational stories, and real talk with friends who happen to be therapists. Please welcome your co-hosts, Nikki Young and Alyssa Nahara.
Therapists Uncut. We are super stoked to be back for what? Is this our third recording with Natalie Silva? There's been some developments on her end professionally and personally, I guess. So we're here to actually chat about both. Natalie, I'll let you introduce yourself, but I would love to hear you kind of describe a little bit about some of your new business ventures.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back. This is my third time recording with you guys. So yeah, I'm Natalie Silva. I run a virtual mental health practice for women's mental health. And since our last recording together, I have also partnered with Kara Cruz Psychotherapy and Wellness. And together we formed forces and made the Women's Support Circle, which is a place for all women. And we provide psychoeducational workshops and support groups. And we're even trying to incorporate a space that's just for therapists. So we do networking events and social events to keep the connection in the community.
And we just attended our first the other night. It was pretty awesome. It was cool, especially I think coming out of the pandemic, right? Because I think some of these are connections we might have made sooner. New providers in the area, people changing programs, going out in private practice, but we just haven't had the opportunity. So I know that was my first chance to. I mean, obviously I knew some of you, but there was many people there that I only knew by name. So thank you.
Congratulations, Natalie. That's such a wonderful thing. And off camera, we were able to hear how that organically came into play. And those are always the best projects. And we are certain that the collaboration that you and Kara Cruz have is only going to bring fantastic things for the future for us as therapists, local therapists, but also for the women in the groups that you guys are going to be serving in the future and those individuals. So tell us, Natalie, what are you here to share with our listeners today?
So today I reached out to you guys because it's been a topic that I've personally been going through. And as I was going through it, I just kept coming back to this space of this isn't something that people talk about. So we're going to be diving into dating after divorce and dating as a single mom or a single parent. It was something that I have been going through the last year and some change. And I just feel like it was a topic that I wasn't hearing a lot about. Divorce can still be really hush hush, and there's a lot of stigma, which gets internalized when you're going through it. And it almost feels like you're not allowed to talk about it. Even sitting here right now, I'm checking in with myself and it feels like, oh goodness, don't say too much. You want
is this an expose? Does it feel expose-ish?
Yes, which is, we're going to just acknowledge those thoughts and feelings, but I'm not going to operate out of them because this is that lots of people go through. And I just wanted to share my one little corner of the world with others. If you're also sitting here listening and dealing with the same feelings and thoughts.
The beauty of this podcast is, as you guys listen as a part of the TU crew, you not only get personal experiences or stories from Nick and I, but you also get those personal accounts from the people who are fantastic humans that come on the podcast to share them with you. And now here you have Natalie Silva, a licensed marriage and family therapist who works with women in these kinds of scenarios, but still is able to acknowledge that this personal process is in fact a process. Mm-hmm. So as therapists, we're still human. And if anything, we have more of a responsibility to acknowledge and be aware of how we're processing things and decide what to do about them. And so I hope today you're able to really get a glimpse into what this has been like for Natalie personally as a person. And I hope it normalizes it for you if you have ever been a single parent or a single individual trying to date after divorce or a separation.
Yeah, we could have a whole other episode on dating as a therapist.
Ooh. Every time Natalie comes on, she just drops you.
I am so here for that one because you hadn't even finished that statement and I had 6 examples pop into my head.
That's a fun one.
I can share a few because I started in the online dating world in the beginning. And so we can have a few humorous stories I can share as we go on.
Oh, Natalie is with us almost literally every single season we have on Therapists Uncut. Yeah. Well, Natalie, before we get too far off topic, what is it that led to you having this epiphany of this is what I'm going through and nobody talks about it?
Yeah. So where my mind is going right now is I think it was being a therapist and supporting other women who are going through divorce, who are stepping out into the dating world and navigating all of our like internal thoughts and beliefs around that. And then I felt not in my therapist hat, but in my, single mom going through a divorce hat of like, me too. But the therapy session isn't always the most appropriate. And I mean, a lot of my clients do know that I've gone through this, to an appropriate degree, but it still didn't feel like it was for me, of course, right. as it should be. But I think it was kind of this little seed that got planted in my heart of like, you deserve to take up space too, and it's not going to be in this world. So let's talk about it in another world where we can kind of dive into it. And it's unraveling. I'm currently in a really healthy relationship, and there are still things that I'm like, oh man, this is ever evolving. Healthy relationships take a lot of work, but it's different type of work.
So. Very much so.
Oh, we have so many questions. Nick, where do you want to start?
First of all, like, go you. I'm just thinking about sessions like you're talking about, right? So many people, this is just a part of life, right? And I want to start by saying this was something that it sounds like you felt you were ready and wanted for your life. Now, I know you personally say, I know that you're also a mom. How many people sit in our office and put that whole side of themselves away and just, I'm a mom now, right? I don't deserve, or I don't have time to invest in this process, right? I just need to focus on my kid. And not to say there's not a time or a place for that, right? If that's where somebody's at listening to this, there is. But I think a lot of moms never or don't allow themselves initially to get to that place of, I'm still a human, I'm still a woman, I'm still adjective here. I deserve a life in addition to.
Absolutely. And I see the flip side of it as well. I see the privilege that I had in not having to rush into another relationship, because I think a lot of, well, I'll speak from a woman's perspective, a lot of women, and I guess there would be some men too, but feel that they have to go find someone because it's freaking expensive out here, guys.
Live in California. Yeah. California's prices are pretty high.
I joke all the time, like, oh God, if I could, like just how expensive health insurance is, or groceries or whatever. And I'm a, self-employed individual now, so everything feels ultra expensive, but it allows me to remember that like I cast no judgment on the choices that anybody makes. I am very thankful that I did what I could do like along the divorce process to set myself up so that when I was ready to date, it wasn't going to come from any other place other than really being emotionally ready and open. It wasn't because of, I needed financial support or help with raising Rosie or anything like that. It was emotionally, individually, as me, I'm ready and open.
You set yourself up for success.
Yeah.
Which I'll throw myself under the bus. I have been through a divorce as well for sexuality reasons, right? We were young, hadn't figured myself out. Amazing man. But I did not set myself up for success, right? I did not take the time to process and heal and such before I just fell in. I don't even know that I jumped. I just kind of fell, right? So setting yourself up for success.
And I mean, I think all choices are ultimately just feedback, right? Like, we're not here to criticize those parts of ourselves that, moved at whatever pace felt right or safe in the moment. But in retrospect, I mean, God, the last time I dated, I was 23. We're talking about a different Natalie that existed.
I mean, does social media and dating apps even exist when not that you're super old, but I mean, at 23, that's very different.
I met my ex-husband on Plenty of Fish when that was the app of, dating worlds. But yeah, I mean, navigating dating a second or third or whatever time around as like a completely different person too. It's a wild experience.
Yeah, because you're right. You're a different person than the last time you did this.
Yes. Yes. And thank God for therapy. I mean, I've talked about my therapist probably in every episode I've been on. And, still with her. She's amazing.
That relationship was made to last.
Seriously, I'm with her until she retires. But it was
mine's not allowed to retire. She's just got it. Yeah.
No, exactly. But that space also helped me to unpack, maybe why I would feel certain bouts of urgency. And it was usually out of that, like anxiety or God, I should be doing it. Like therapy for me was such a sacred space of like slowing down and getting in tune to like what really felt right for me, and still offers that. I still struggle a lot with anxious attachment and, trauma triggers from being in a toxic, unhealthy relationship that, thank goodness, now I have like a healthy, safe space to work through those things with someone, who's totally committed. But that hasn't always been the case. There was a period of time where I didn't have that and I had to do this all by myself.
Mm-hmm. And that so
explain what's going on, Alyssa.
Nick and I are laughing because we are working through. So if you guys have been following us for a while, you know that we take the holidays off, and if you don't know this yet, we kind of try to batch some of these episodes so that way we can have time for our personal lives. Well, in doing all of that and wrapping up the new, end of the year, Nick and I haven't been in a recording together for
months.
Not
to mention, we've not been in a virtual recording session with one another. We were in person
for like a year.
We're like movies all over again, and we're super grateful that it's Natalie here with us today because she's extending us a lot of grace.
And so we appreciate your guys' grace as you're listening, because
as we just interrupt each other left and right.
Roll with the interruptions today. I promise we will fall into it.
It is. I really
It is. So there's two things that stood out when Natalie was talking. One is, for you listening, it is okay to go back to your therapist when your life needs it again.
Tune up.
Sometimes people think, well, I already did it. I've spent X amount of months or years in therapy. What's wrong with me that I can't do this on my own? That's not how this process works. Life changes all the time. We are at different moments in our life, different external stressors. And so if you have found a therapist that you have a strong relationship with, absolutely call them back up and see if they got availability, whether it's 3 months, 3 years later, because that's how this process works. So that's point number one. Point number two, I know, come back to, I almost lost my train of thought now for point two. Point two was, what else did you learn about yourself, Natalie, through this process that maybe surprised you?
I like that.
I think through the entire process of going through a divorce and becoming a single parent, I had to learn, and becoming a business owner, I had to learn to be uncomfortable with the discomfort of not knowing what comes next. That I had to find that internal peace to rest in when everything else around me felt really uncertain. And maybe it would help to give a little timeline. So pandemic happened, right? March 2020. My ex-husband and I separated in May of 2020. And so I spent the remainder of that time working 2 jobs. I birthed my business in April of 2020. And then wild. I guess I just love
March, April, May.
After adrenaline, right? And I knew that I channeled all that anxiety of COVID into my business. It was like I needed to know. I didn't know what my agency job was going to look like. Schools were closing left and right. There were massive changes happening in the field of mental health. And yeah, I was like, all right, go. Now's go time. We're doing it. So I launched the practice, which gave me great supplemental income to help alleviate some of that financial worry that happens when going through a divorce, which helped me stay in the clear of my mind. I didn't have to get so caught up in, oh my God, I can't take care of my basic needs. But the offset of that was, it was incredibly stressful to work 2 full-time jobs and build a business and go through a divorce and be a single parent. I think I left my agency job the July of 2021 and was officially divorced by December of 2021. So it was a fairly long process. And through that, that's what I had to go back on, is like, you're not going to know what comes next, Natalie, but every part of this process, you have somehow figured out.
And it sounds like you did work around turning inward for that. Because a lot of people will continue, right? I mean, I know I have, and we look outward for that. As we're going through these hectic times or whatnot. And so to be able to turn inward is a skill that will serve somebody well in.
There are so many times, and I didn't execute it perfectly. Any listener listening to us right now, like, there were times where I definitely was a hot mess and did not act out of that internal place. But
I think one of the phrases you used, I think, is key. You said slow down.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a huge piece of it, because whether it be the emotional process and I'm going to compare this to large life events in general, right? So a divorce, a death, there's so many practical life stuff that you have to handle that is completely irrelevant if you look at relationships in the grand scheme of things in terms of emotional connection and trauma and all of that, right? Bank accounts, phones, finances, a roof over my, all these things that complicate a relational experience.
Yeah. I mean, I was with my ex-husband for almost 10 years. There was a lot of intertwinedness, and it wasn't even just intertwining myself with him. I mean, we still have our daughter. We have to figure out, how we stay together in a co-parenting relationship for her. But there's families, and families that I have good relationships with, and knowing how that relationship changes as a divorce gets introduced into the equation. Being on like different emotional pages too, it depends on who was the person who initiated the divorce or not. Like it takes a long time to get to that place. So sometimes when divorce is finally introduced and put on the table, you've got two different people who are at very different stages of the grief process. And so for me, tying that back into dating, I needed to go through all of that. Me personally, maybe not everybody was like this, but I needed to go through that singularly in my single self, because I really did need to focus on building my business, taking care of my daughter. And I knew, it was funny, I knew all along, like, I didn't feel so jaded after my divorce that it was like, oh, fuck this, I don't ever want to do this again. Like, there's time and place for that. If you are sitting here listening and thinking like, oh, hell no, I don't ever want to date again. Definitely had days where I was like, oh, no, thank you. Yeah, like I had to go through all of those feelings before I could kind of come back to this maybe more equalized emotional state of, okay, maybe I still am not really sure, but let's like open up the door and see, what it looks like. I think I stayed in the shadows of online dating for like 3 months before I was like, okay, I'm interested in this person, maybe I'll reach out or pursue something further than just browsing and being a total creeper.
Window shopping.
Yes, oh, that's such a good one. As you were shadowing and window shopping, what led you to determine I'm going to step out of the shadows now? Like, what were your reservations and how did you work through those? For
a long time, I felt like I was doing something wrong. For a long time, I still had this like married mentality, this like inappropriate sense of loyalty to something that, oh my gosh, I have to do this in secret because if anybody finds out, it's like I'm, stepping outside of my marriage. And that probably is like the denial part of divorce, that you actually aren't doing anything wrong because you're not married anymore. And divorce is messy, like not messy. It's long, you guys. Like courts were backed up forever because of COVID. And so
that's a good point. Yeah.
Like you're not officially divorced, so is it wrong? Like legally on paper, you're technically still married. And everybody can come up with their own feelings around that. For me, it felt fine. For me, I had come to the place of like that chapter was done far before a judge put their stamp of approval on it. So I think I had to give myself permission of like,
you had to process through that too.
Yeah, like I'm not doing anything wrong. And I have such a great village. Like no one in my circle was telling me, oh, this is like too soon, So yeah, I stayed in the shadows for a couple of months. And then it's actually how I found my current partner. And he was cute, y'all. Big old beard, big tall guy. Like,
oh,
I'm gonna shoot my shot.
We'll get a permission. We'll make a post about him on social media.
So what was that like? Shooting your shot as a different Natalie than shot her shot to, you know what I mean? Like what was that like?
This is what I do. This is what I did last time. Like I know what I like. And so I guess I in the dating realm have always been a little bit more comfortable being the initiator. And so that wasn't really different for me. And I think if I were to really analyze that, it probably gives some semblance of just being a little bit more in control instead of filtering through all of the people that were, expressing interest in me, because those didn't always pan out. It really wasn't that bad. I didn't get a lot of the stereotypical things that are associated with online dating. He was probably maybe one of 5. I didn't spend a lot of time. And then I feel like I just got lucky. Like I really do feel like I lucked out, and we had like overlappings of the social circles. I actually worked with his sister at one point.
Wow.
We didn't know that. And so that maybe is like the universe sending me some semblance of like familiarity.
So it's possible that we all might have worked with a sister at one point. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So for our new listeners,
run in that arena at one point.
Yes, all of our new listeners, the 3 of us all work together. So many of us have worked at this one nonprofit agency. So that was a joke, but I guess it might be true.
You would probably know her. And so that made it easier. I'm really thankful. So a lot of the aspects of my story, I recognize are from this little place of privilege or just sheer luck. Like I just so happened to find someone who is an incredible man. And there were overlapping familiarities that made that process a little less scary. But then I also am like, don't negate your own journey, Natalie. Like you laid down the path for maybe all of this goodness to be received to you. So, yeah.
Well, we are so happy for you. Because look at if you're watching
she's beaming.
Video, she's legitimately glowing. You are in such a good place of, it sounds like, healing and happiness. And I'm going to bring your daughter into this. How old is your daughter now?
We'll be 6 next month, you guys.
So as having a 6-year-old daughter, as you are navigating this process, whom you are still in contact with your ex-husband, you are co-parenting. How did that play a role in all of this for you? Or how does it still?
Yeah, I think everybody has to make decisions that feel right for themselves. So my journey of navigating dating as a single mom is traditional or textbook in many ways. And then there are some decisions that I have made that are because of what I feel was best for me and best for my daughter and best for my current relationship. I waited a while. I met my current partner towards the end of 2021. And he did not meet Rosie until May of 2022. I needed to vet this man. Like, you're not the most precious thing in my life, right off the bat. And that's what felt right for me, is that I needed to move slowly because I describe myself in relationships as like a little golden retriever. Like, once you have me, I'm just loyal. And I knew that about myself. But I've also done enough work to be aware that I can become committed to people who are not always in my best interest. And there was a part of me that needed to be aware of that. And it just happened that I'm now committed to somebody who is really good for me. It
didn't just so happen, right? You were aware of it going into this time. And
I had all these feelings of like, I think there's a certain normal part of fantasy that happens in the very beginning parts of dating, right? Is like, it's okay to go 5-10 years out. Sometimes that's how we navigate choices and decisions in dating. And I felt solid in my decision for him to meet Rosie after we had our first couple trip away. Like I got to see him, out in the world and
it's natural. Yeah. Not on his best behavior at dinner once. Yeah.
It was just, I just felt emotionally and in my body like it was okay, that we were ready, that we were there. And so, yeah, they met, and navigating that, like, what do we even do?
Right.
What's the activity? How long do we hang out together? And I think too much, you guys. So
and she's 6. She's like, we can color.
Yeah,
some bubbles.
And then it was down to the detail of like, is it better out in a neutral place? And I surveyed all of my friends who've been through this. And like, what did you do? And how did your kid act? And that's me going outside of myself, right? And so, but that's part of my process usually in any decision that I make. And then I've learned to settle back into a place that's more me. And even though most of the feedback I got was like, oh, neutral place, don't bring them to your house. I know my kid, and my kid feels safest in her home. And and because I have felt I had vetted, we'll use that word, like, this is a safe person. This is a person that I feel very committed to, that I see long term. It felt okay for me to have us meet all together here. And then I even asked my daughter, what do you want to do? Like, this is mommy's, new person. And they had had some phone calls beforehand. So that was also really important to me too, was that I don't want my daughter to just meet someone that she's never heard their voice or, doesn't have any contact with them. So we intentionally kind of planned before an actual face-to-face meeting that there would be some sort of like exchange or interaction. And so we ended up going bowling, and
Nice.
it was so fun. And he ended up like winning like 15,000 arcade tickets for her.
Oh, he is in.
I have a picture of them, actually. She's literally like carrying all this stuff. There's like a fishing pole at some point. And they just had
that didn't hurt.
and he loved it. Like, you know, and so it was, I just kept thinking like the entire time, like this feels so easy. And relationships haven't always felt easy. And just that sense alone was really healing. It was like such a corrective experience. And I also kept thinking throughout the whole time, like, oh, he's going to reach his limit. Like, not that my daughter is a lot, you know, she's so pleasant and enjoyable and I love spending time with her. But if you are not a parent, and my current partner, he doesn't have any children of his own, I was just so gauging like, oh, he's going to like, we're going to reach our, you know, he spent like 8 hours with us. He came back and we went swimming and I think we had dinner, and it was awesome to watch my daughter too. Like, are you going to stay for dinner? Are you going to go swimming? Like, she didn't want it to end.
Was your little mama heart totally feeling that?
Died 1,000 deaths of cuteness overload since watching them form their own special relationship. Because, man, yeah, like falling in love after divorce is its own special, like sacred experience. But then watching your kid also.
So you're in love? Is that what you're saying?
Very much in love.
Public announcement.
Nice catch, Alyssa.
Natalie is in love. All right, everybody send her a card. Tell her how her.
I love it. If my partner's listening, I love you. I love you so much.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, but watching Rosie get attached and knowing like it's so good. Man, that blows my own experience out of the water. We just went to Disneyland together for like our first trip, all of us, and yeah, died 1,000 deaths of cuteness.
Natalie, I have a question that I'm almost nervous to ask, so you can tell me if you're not comfortable answering. Okay.
I just got nervous for you. I don't know what's coming.
I don't want to kill this happy fairy tale ending vibe. I want to stay up.
No, but what is that?
I mean, you co-parent, right? So what questions were you asking yourself if and when you were exploring, how do I now introduce my current partner into my daughter's father's conversations?
Yeah. So after we had our first couples trip where it was solidified for me that, oh yeah, I'm ready for him to meet Rosie and I'm ready for Rosie to meet him. I then knew, like, out of respect for my co-parent, that it was time to like introduce this idea that I'm seeing somebody, because to my knowledge, he did not know that up until I told him. It's birthed a lot of really important conversations between Rosie and I, where, you know, I remind her that nobody on this planet will ever replace your dad. Your dad will always be dad. There's room in your heart for all different kinds of people. And, you know, my partner is just there as like a really good friend and he loves you. But he's never going to be your dad. That relationship is really sacred. But that doesn't mean that this part isn't filled with like some conflict or still some hurt feelings, or maybe me seeing a situation in a very different perspective than my co-parent would. And sometimes that doesn't always align. And it's hard. I have to grieve my own idea of what I would like co-parenting to look like. I would not choose this, but this is where we're at. There have been so many times, y'all, that I've wanted to get caught up in like the rage of divorce. And I always have to go back to this mantra of like, as angry as I am or as hurt as I am, I love my daughter 1,000 times more than any of those feelings. Like, and if I can lead with that, that's been the like northern guiding light that's gotten a lot of things without a lot of regret. I have not always executed it perfectly. I have definitely had my own messy responses, but that is also a part of just the
humanity.
Yeah. And how do we forgive ourselves for that? And then layer being a therapist on top of that, like that has also birthed a lot of feelings of, you know, guilt. You should know better.
If we could just take a moment to acknowledge, it's always so vulnerable for anybody to come on our podcast and share their expertise or their personal experience or a combination of both. But for Natalie to reach out to us and intentionally put herself in this very vulnerable public platform,
the hot seat,
yes, to talk about these topics, I just want to say thank you for allowing us. We always tell our listeners, thank you for allowing us into your lives. But Natalie, today, thank you for allowing us into yours.
Totally. Yeah.
It's not easy to talk about, like, even in just saying certain things out loud. If you've been through a tumultuous, relationship, you have these like physical responses, these thoughts of, oh my gosh, like retaliation is coming, you're going to get in trouble. And I'm just going to trust that, like, I felt called to talk about this for a reason, because I know I'm not the only one that sits and feels this way, and the more about it, the less stigmatized it's going to be. The less scary it's going to be.
Natalie, if you had a friend come to you or a family member that you love to say, I'm going through a divorce, these things are happening, what would be the top 3 considerations you would encourage them to think about?
I would get a therapist. I would encourage them to practice pausing as much as they can. I really try very hard in my co-parenting relationship to create that pause intentionally. I don't respond to things right away. I don't commit yeses or nos right away. I give myself a chance to breathe a little bit. So I'm not reacting, I'm responding. And that's been really helpful. And the third one, I would say to just practice non-judgment, that it's a lot to go through a divorce, and you're going to feel a variety of things, but you're not broken. You were a whole person before that relationship, and you will become a whole person after.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think that, each of those 3 was absolutely 100%, right? 100% to hear that, take that away. And I think the non-judgment piece is huge, right? Because you're not going to do this perfectly. May not even do it well.
Yeah. You're allowed to be a hot mess after you go through something so life-changing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Natalie, where can our listeners find you if they would like to connect with you?
Yeah, so I have a presence on Instagram, mostly Instagram, but I'm also on Facebook, and they can find me at natalie.silva.lmft, or you can always email me, connect@nataliesilva.lmft.com.
And does your women's support circle also have any websites or social media presence?
Yeah. If let's say you're already in therapy and that's going great for you, but you're just wanting to add something where you're more in community, we do virtual, and we're going to be adding in-person workshops, and they can find us on IG at women's.support.circle.
And if you're a therapist listening to this, I'm sure there'll be another therapist night out coming up.
Yeah. If you were in California, feel free to drive by.
Absolutely. We're planning for summer. So if anybody knows any local venues that would be good for hosting that networking type of event, we are taking feedback.
My name is Alyssa Nahara, licensed clinical social worker, and I'm here with my co-host, Nick Young, licensed marriage and family therapist. We are your Therapists Uncut crew. Thank you for allowing us into your lives and helping us make mental health relatable.
Thank you for joining Therapists Uncut, a production of AMP Smart Business. To learn more about Therapists Uncut and stay up on upcoming episodes, please subscribe and follow us on social media. As a reminder, although the Therapists Uncut co-hosts are licensed therapists, they are not your therapists. This podcast is not intended to substitute professional mental health counseling. If you need professional therapy, please contact your local provider or primary care provider. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Therapists Uncut.